Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Fanfic Series 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was trained by a deadly mistress and surrounded by women who would die for him? Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Konoha. 3 days later. Jiraiya grumbled in annoyance to himself as he strolled down the main street of the village, ignoring the various shops that lined both sides of the massive street. The white-haired man despised returning to the village every time to make his monthly reports, mainly because due to that thrice-damned bitch, he couldn't do any research for his beloved book series while he was in the village thanks to those damned seals around the hot springs. He had hoped that after the Kyuubi attack, the seals would have been destroyed and he would be free to peek upon the local beauties once more, but the damned seals remained intact. If anything, it was like the residual chakra left behind by the attack had empowered them and made them even stronger than before, to the point that his mere presence near the hot springs would alert the Anbu to his location, regardless of which side he was on. Hope that bitch is rotting in hell where she belongs. The Toad Sage thought darkly to himself. At least her bastard child will be useful to me. Despite claiming to be the kid's godfather, the man held no real love for the brat in any sense of the word. It was only because of the vague prophecy spoken by the Toad Elder that he was even interested in the brat. Something along the lines of, "A child born of two legends, guided by a mighty warrior shall reshape the shinobi world." Or something like that. Jiraiya never paid much attention to the actual words, only what it meant. At least to him. Though it was clear to the perverted hermit that the child in question was none other than his prized student's brat, as the Yondaime had become quite infamous throughout the entirety of the elemental nations. He could also grudgingly admit that the crimson-haired bitch had a reputation of her own that had given her a legendary status throughout the lands as well. So, that covered the child of prophecy's lineage, and it was clear that he was to be the mighty warrior that would guide the boy. Just need to train the brat up just enough to barely make it to the end, and then, being the noble and virtuous man that I am, I will finish what my apprentice started and avenge his death. The white-haired perverted lucidly mused to himself, imagining his perfect scenario for the boy. Women will throw themselves at my feet, begging me to give them children. Even Suheim wouldn't be able to refuse me anymore. Granted, he was well aware there was no feasible way for him to accurately predict the trials and tribulations that the brat would have to face to bring about this change to the shinobi world, which is why he had put his plan in motion early on when he released the boy's status to the civilian populace and had let their own fear take over from there. Thus creating his own trials for the Gaki, isolating the boy and making him desperate for any kind of attention, be it positive or negative. Then when the brat had been enrolled into the academy, he had bribed Iruka Yumino to hold the kid back as much as possible without it seeming too obvious. Even keeping quiet when his spies had discovered that Mizuki was working for his disgraced former teammate, Orochimaru. Allowing the silver-haired instructor to move around freely, knowing it served his own purpose as well. Due to the Mon's genuine hatred for the Jinchuriki, even though he hid it well, it positioned Iruka to be able to act as a strict instructor in the academy but a caring older brother figure outside the classroom. It had come as a surprise to the Toad Sage when he had learned that not only had Mizuki had been captured but had been severely beaten down by the Jinchuriki, rendering the silver-haired Chunin immobilized. Which had resulted in the blonde's field promotion to Genin. When Iruka had first reported this, Jiraiya had thought that the brat had already tapped into the fox's power, but those fears were laid to rest simply by the lack of malicious chakra residue the fox would have left behind. Unfortunately, the scarred Chunin couldn't keep the boy completely isolated, as the brat had already formed a strong bond with father and daughter duo at the ramen stand, giving him a sense of extended family. Then, despite all odds, the brat had even gotten close to the resident snake mistress, Enko Mitarashi, with the two of them becoming practically inseparable and extremely protective of one another. Uruka had attempted to intervene, of course, first by trying to get close to the young ramen waitress. Frequenting the ramen stand multiple times a week, offering to help and even walk her home during the late nights, in hopes of diverting the young woman's attention away from the Jinchuriki. However, it had all been for naught, since the young ramen waitress had been steadily dating the young Hana Inuzuka for nearly a year by that point, throwing a massive wrench into the scarred Chunin's plan to seduce her. With Anko, however, he had found help from an unlikely source in the form of the snake mistress's best friend and practically sister-like figure, Kurenai Yuhi, whom had been trying to hook her friend up with a decent guy. However, it had proven to be fruitless, as the snake mistress took an immediate disliking the scarred Chunin. Even more so after the man had attempted to bring up his brother-like relationship with the whiskered teen. Even to this day, after countless rejections, some more brutal than others, Uruka continued to pursue the purple-haired woman, reminding Jiraiya of his own one-sided pursuit of his teammate. Jiraiya couldn't blame the man though. Mitarashi was without a doubt one of the finest pieces of in Konoha right now, and the only remaining Ice Queen that had yet to be claimed. Hana Inuzuka had been going steady with Ayame Ichiraku for the last 3 years. Yugao Izuki had started dating Hayate Gecko just last year, and lastly, Kurenai Yuhi had hooked up with Asuma Sarutobi a little over 8 months ago. So the question is, who will land her first, Uruka or myself? Jiraiya mentally grinned, knowing he had an ace up his sleeve that the Chunin lacked, a lure to dangle before the snake mistress to lead her on until she would cave and give him what he wanted, and after he had had his fill of her, he would leave her, abandoned with promises unfulfilled like he had with so many other women before her. A flash of purple to the right of him caught his attention as the woman in question disappearing behind the cloth flap of the dango stand she often frequented. Seems Kami is giving me a sign. He grinned before altering his direction, following the snake mistress into the stand. It didn't take long for the large man to make his way across the busy street, his large size making it easy for him gently push his way through the crowd of people that had populated the main street of the village. Deciding to listen in to read the room, as it were, he stopped just to the side of the doorway and listened in. So, it's been just over a week. He heard the bartender inquire. He could almost imagine the woman's grin on her face, waiting to hear some juicy gossip. Go on any dates with your stud muffin yet? Date, stud muffin. Jiraiya did not like the sounds of these 3 words together in the same sentence. Could Uruka have actually succeeded in wearing her down to finally give him a chance? Not yet, sadly. In between him training for the Chunin finals and my own duties, haven't had the time to go out. So whoever this mystery guy is, he's in the finals. The perverted toad sage mused. Could the Uchiha brat have landed her? He didn't seem that particularly interested in any of the girls that chased after him in the academy. Or maybe he has a thing for older women. Of course Jiraiya didn't dismiss the possibility that she could have gotten involved with one of the visiting genin from Sunagaku or Otogaku. If that were the case, all the better. He could call into question her loyalty to the village to coerce her into sleeping with him for his silence. We were supposed to have the night to ourselves few days back, but the old man called us in and well, that's when he got his new roommate. Heard about that, the bartender replied. How you holding up with that arrangement? I wasn't a big fan of the arrangement at first, considering what she tried to do. Anko replied before chuckling slightly. But, he has a big heart and encouraged us to give her a chance, and to be fair, she has shown genuine remorse for her actions. What the hell are you doing out there, Jiraiya? Came the upset tone of the bartender, causing Jiraiya to jump comically from his position outside the door, all the while mentally cursing himself at getting caught. You got a lot of nerve coming back here after what you pulled last time. Hey. Jiraiya jovially greeted the 2 women as he entered the establishment, ignoring the scowl etched across both women's faces. Kimi-chan, Anko-chan, It's been a while. Well, if it isn't the frog. Anko muttered loud enough for the perverted sage to hear. I thought I smelled desperation and shame. They're toads. Jiraiya corrected with a frown, hating when people called his summons frogs. You didn't deny that you them. The snake mistress retorted with a snort, turning away from the large man. The toad sage scowled at this as the women chuckled at his expense. What are you doing here, Jiraiya? Kimiko inquired, leveling a glare towards the white-haired man, the tone in her voice making it very clear that she was not happy to see him again. Come on, Kimi-chan, you can't still be mad over that, right? You summoned a 300-pound frog on top of my bar, crushing 5 patrons, all to impress some guy in drag. Kimiko pointed out angrily. Toads, not frogs. He corrected once again. And it was a woman, not some guy in drag, right? The last bit he was not completely sure. Having had more than usual to drink that particular evening, he just remembered being mesmerized by a blonde bombshell with vibrant blue eyes, wearing a low-cut pink dress with yellow flowers, giving him a rather generous view of her cleavage and long slender legs. Oh, trust me, that was a man that you were trying to woo. She pointed out matter-of-factually. Tibony is a regular here, and come to think about it, he has been asking about you. Sue, Anko-chan, couldn't help but overhear that you have a boyfriend now. Jiraiya interrupted, not wanting to continue that particular topic as his face took on a sickly greenish color. I guess congratulations are in order. How about I buy you a few drinks to celebrate? You make it sound like you expected me to stay single forever. Anko growled out, not liking that the self-proclaimed super pervert was prying into her personal affairs. And you can take those drinks and your congratulations and shove them up your. Now, Anko-chan, no need to be like that. Jiraiya attempted to pacify the snake mistress, only to receive a glare for his trouble. Anyways, I gotta head back before Ibiki bites my head off for taking too long, and I wanna check in on Naruto-kun before my lunch break is over, and with him training in the Forest of Death, going to take a bit to get to him. The perplexed commented, turning her attention back to her friend to bid her farewell. Paying for her dango, she disappeared out the door. Not paying the perverted sage a second glance, Jiraiya was silent as he stared at the entryway the snake mistress had just disappeared out of, his mind analyzing what he had just heard. While on the surface, it appeared to be nothing. After all, his reports had stated that the Jinchuriki and the snake mistress were good friends. However, there was something in her voice when she said the brat's name that suggested otherwise. So you going to order anything, or are you just going to stand there all day? Maybe later, Jiraiya replied. I gotta take care of some things while I am here. Not giving any further explanation, he disappeared out the door. Training Ground 44, Forest of Death. Boar, dog, bird, monkey, ram. Naruto recited as he went through the proper seals for the summoning technique. Early in the morning, Yuri had allowed him to sign her spider summoning contract, a great honor she had told him, as the spider clan were extremely selective of who they allowed to even be considered becoming their summoner, and had given him until late afternoon to at least summon the spider that would become his personal summon. While it sounded simple enough, regulating the chakra needed for a decent summon without overpowering the jutsu required a bit of finesse that he was lacking in. As was evident by the amount of spider hatchlings of varying sizes that were crawling around and on top of him from his multiple failed attempts. Any fool can pour all of their chakra and summon the largest beast they can muster to show off. Yuri had told him, you need to be able to summon what you need on instinct. There was wisdom in the Widowmaker's words. He wouldn't always have the advantage of having a larger chakra pool than his opponent. Not to mention it would be foolish to believe every battle will go his way. After all, there were means to seal off one's chakra points. Either through Fuinjutsu, while rarely practiced, or an encounter with a Hyuga. Finishing the required hand seals, he bit his already damaged thumb for fresh blood and smeared it along his palm before slamming it down to the ground. "Kuchio's no jutsu," he exclaimed. A large cloud of smoke filled the area, far larger than his previous attempts, completely obscuring his vision of anything in front of him. However, his heightened senses told him that he was no longer alone. Something was with him, something rather large. As the wisps of smoke cleared, a large spider standing roughly around 6 feet tall stood in front of the whiskered teen. It had an out-thrust head with 2 great clusters of many-windowed glossy eyes that reflected the rays of sunlight that filtered through the leaves of the surrounding trees, a large horn-like crest crowning its head. Its large body, which looked like a bloated bag, was a midnight black and blotched with lighter shades of gray that wove an intricate design around its torso, while the belly was pale and luminous. 8 bent legs with great knobbed joints stretched out from underneath its thorax with hairs that stuck out like steel spines running down towards the massive creature's clawed foot. Excited chittering could be heard from the spider as it eagerly clicked its large fangs together, roughly 1.5 feet in length each. "Beautiful," Naruto gasped in awe as he took in the sight. Having been fascinated with spiders at a young age, the whiskered teen was left breathless at the sight of the majestic-looking arachnid before him. "Hee, why thank you." The spider spoke in a feminine tone, indicating that it was female. "You must be our new summoner, such a charmer." "That is correct," Naruto replied, finding his voice. "I am Naruto Uzumaki. Yuri-chan allowed me to sign the contract this morning." "Well met, young Naruto." The spider greeted. "I am Shalab, daughter of Ungoliant, and as you were able to summon me, that makes me your personal summon." "Congratulations." "Thank you, Shalab-sama." The blonde Jinchuriki bowed, only to be thwacked on top of the head by one of the spider's legs. "None of that sama or bowing crap," she hissed, showing her displeasure at such actions. "The toads and snakes may require such lip service and adulation, but we of the Spider Clan prefer action over words." "I understand," Naruto responded, rubbing the top of his head. "For now, I must return to Brazilian Forest so that I may inform my mother of our pact," Shalab stated before giving a soft chuckle. "Be sure to summon me when Yuri-sama returns. Farewell, young Uzumaki." With that, the large spider disappeared in a puff of smoke, before the sound of someone approaching from his left caught his attention. "Uzumaki-san." A soft voice came from his left. Looking in that direction, he saw Tsubaki leaping down from a tree branch, landing a few yards away. "Lady Yuri had requested I bring you lunch." "Ah, thank you Tsubaki-san." The blonde smiled warmly at his new arrival, standing up from his kneeling position to greet the former Jonin. To say that the last 10 days were interesting would have been a severe understatement, as Naruto had learned all too late that the old man had forgotten to inform the duo of the Jinchuriki's relation to the woman that had hospitalized the raven-haired former Jonin. The poor woman had completely frozen up when Yuri had entered the compound, which had only served to amuse the Widowmaker to no end. Fortunately, or unfortunately depending how one would look at it, Yuri had kept her amusement to simple verbal harassment and teasing. Though, while Naruto was kind enough not to hang her new status over her head, Yuri lacked such empathy and made it abundantly clear of her position. She was to tend to the young Uzumaki's needs. Ever single one of them. The implications were clear, which is why, much to Naruto's embarrassment, Tsubaki would join him in the bath every morning and evening to help him wash. The fact that she would bathe with him completely had only added to his embarrassment. She was also given the task of cooking his daily meals, which was why she stood before him with a large bento box in hand. "Smells delicious, Tsubaki-san." The whiskered blonde complimented as he accepted the bento being offered to him, catching a whiff of the tantalizing aroma coming from the bento, giving the black-haired woman a sense of appreciation for her efforts. "Thank you, Uzumaki-san. Tsubaki lightly blushed. Being complimented by a man, even one as young as her master, was a foreign experience to her, as Mizuki had rarely ever complimented her while they were dating, and usually when he did, he would expect something in return. Unlike the whiskered teen before her, whom had no ulterior motive when he paid her a compliment. Opening the box, Naruto found a typical lunch spread for him. A generous portion of steamed rice, enough miso soup for a couple of people, and various other side dishes such as grilled fish, tamagoyaki, pickles, nori, natto, and a large bowl of udon noodles. Accompanying all of this was a small kettle of green tea and 4 rice balls. The teenage Uzumaki was about to take a bite from the rice ball in his hands when the sound of a low, almost inaudible, rumbling in front of him caught his attention. Looking towards the source, he was met with an embarrassed-looking Tsubaki, whom suddenly found her kunoichi sandals to be far more interesting. "Tsubaki-san, did you eat anything this morning?" the whiskered blonde inquired with a concerned look. That is," she stumbled over her words, clearly embarrassed of the situation she was in before composing herself. "Lady Yuri had made it clear that I was to tend to you first and foremost, every day." Naruto frowned at this. While he was aware that his fiancée wanted to ensure that the woman knew her place, he didn't want her to neglect her own health in fulfilling her duties around the compound. Making a mental note to talk with Yuri about this later this evening. "Would you like to join me?" he inquired, careful to not make it sound like a command, as he reached into the bento and pulled out one of the rice balls. Extending his arm to offer it to the raven-haired woman. For her part, Tsubaki was taken aback by her young master's kindness. Despite what she had done to him, he still cared about her well-being. Graciously she accepted the rice ball and sat down next to him, though with one burning question in her mind. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you so kind to me? After what I had done to you, why don't you hate me?" "Because you don't deserve it," he replied after a few seconds of silence passed between them, turning to look at the woman. "You were grieving and some sick bastard manipulated your emotions with false information to do their dirty work. The way I see it, you were a victim as well." Silence fell between the two once more as she took a small bite from the rice ball in her hand, her young master's words echoing through her mind, unsure as to how to respond. Though while she felt a sense of relief wash over her, realizing that the whiskered teen did not blame her personally for her actions, she still felt guilty for her actions and the harm she had caused him. "You know, it's funny," Naruto began, breaking Tsubaki out of her thoughts. "Despite the mon's hatred towards me, he actually helped me in the academy with my taijutsu and other assignments. I actually trusted Mizuki more than Iruka. Sad to admit, that trust I placed in him was the entire reason I fell for his manipulation to steal the scroll. I guess that makes 2 of us that he manipulated." Tsubaki softly spoke with a sad smile as she recalled his plans to sell her to Orochimaru, meaning all of his honeyed words were nothing more than seductive lies he would whisper in her ears. "While I was in my cell, awaiting my sentencing, I was given all the evidence involving that bastard," she continued, looking down at her lap as she played with the hem of her blue blouse. Among the papers was his journal, detailing his plans to abduct 2 clan heiresses for his own twisted pleasure, as well as his plans to sell me to Orochimaru for experimentation. Naruto remained silent as she spoke, quickly making the connection that the 2 heiresses in question were none other than Hinata and Ino. He watched as her shoulders began to shake as she struggled to hold back sobs of anguish, prompting the whiskered blonde to move forward and pull her into a comforting hug, allowing her to cry into his chest. 250,000 ryo. She sobbed. "That was all my commitment was worth to that bastard." Naruto said nothing as he tightened his embrace around her, one hand rubbing up and down her back while her body racked in sobs, while the other combed his fingers through her hair in a comforting manner. knowing that it had to have been a horrifying experience for the woman to learn that the man she had loved and committed herself to was planning to sell her off to one of Konoha's infamous traders. Not to mention a man known for performing cruel and inhumane experiments on his victims. It had taken a handful of minutes before Tsubaki had calmed down, now sleeping peacefully in the blonde's lap as he laid back against the large tree he had been sitting under, her head facing outwards, away from his torso, giving the whiskered blonde a good view of her face. By the expression on her face, Naruto had surmised that she had probably not had a decent night's sleep since she found out about her ex-fiancé's horrid secrets. Not to mention, being burdened with the guilt of her attack on him just 2 weeks prior. To being manipulated by a two-faced bastard. Naruto mumbled to himself as he laid his head back against the tree and closed his eyes. His lunch forgotten. This was the scene that Jiraiya had come across as he came into the dense forested area where Naruto had chosen to practice his summoning. A perverted smirk spread across his lips as he brought out his notebook and began to furiously jot down notes of the scene before him. However, he paused when he recognized the woman that now lay in the brat's lap. What the hell is she doing here and with him? Jiraiya cursed. He had planned on setting her up to take the fall after feeding her falsified information through his contacts to try and further stunt and isolate the boy and stall his training until he had arrived. Still, perhaps he could still use this to his advantage and get her away from the boy, and perhaps offer her a job working under him. With a grin, he stepped out from his hiding spot. Well, don't you two make a cute couple? He loudly announced his presence, waking the two from the slumber. You're a hard brat to find, you know that. Both Naruto and Tsubaki scrambled to their feet, wary of the strange intruder that had approached them, the latter sporting a healthy blush as she realized the position she had fallen asleep in, which was only compounded by the monk's misguided statement. Who the hell are you? Naruto demanded, stepping in front of Tsubaki in a defensive manner. Not trusting the newcomer in the slightest. Not to mention the man gave off a creepy, almost stalker-like aura that the whiskered teen did not like. Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin. Tsubaki commented, having recognized the man. A deep scowl etched across her face. I see I have a fan. The now identified Jiraiya grinned, winking at the raven-haired Kunoichi. How about we go out for a drink later? Also a desperate pervert that spies on women in the bathhouses to write that damn trash he calls a novel. She continued, disgust evident in her voice. I'm not a pervert, Jiraiya defended with a frown before adopting a boisterous expression. I'm a super pervert. The fact that you say that so proudly is absolutely disgusting. Naruto quipped. What the hell do you want? Don't be like that, Gaki. The large man waved off the boy's insult in his usual jovial tone. After all, I came all the way out here to train you for your Chunin finals. What do you mean, train me? The whiskered teen narrowed his eyes in distrust. Sheesh Gaki, I know you're the dead last of your class but I figured even you would know what it meant to train someone. Jiraiya retorted, taking a jab on the blonde's horrible academic performances. Anyways, talk around the village is that you need someone to help you train for. Not interested. Naruto cut him off. Come on, Gaki. You're really going to turn down being trained by a legendary shinobi like myself? Jiraiya persisted. And not just any of the Sannin, but you're looking at the man that personally trained the Yondaime Hokage. So you trained my father. Is that somehow supposed to make me feel obligated to train under you? The blonde questioned, clearly not impressed by the monk's boasting. Partially because the teenage Jinchuriki didn't exactly have a high opinion of his father. While he understood why the man did what he did to save the village, he still felt the man was far too naive in trusting the villagers viewing him as a hero for keeping the Kyuubi at bay, and their supposed will of fire. Hearing this, Jiraiya's eyes widened visibly, showing his surprise. How the hell does he know? Who told him? The man inwardly seethed in anger before the realization dawned on him. Damn it, sensei. He wasn't supposed to know until I decided he was ready. The toad sage mentally seethed, having planned on manipulating the boy with the knowledge of his parents to gain access to Minato's and that Uzumaki bitch's notes about fuinjutsu, as well as scrolls on their renowned techniques. Only giving the brat scraps of knowledge to keep him satisfied while keeping the bulk to himself. It had always irked him that his own student had surpassed him in the art of fuinjutsu and refused to share his knowledge with him, no doubt due to the red-haired bitch. Regardless, he could salvage this and still obtain what he desired. And why wouldn't you want to learn under me? Jiraiya inquired, faking that he was hurt by the young teen's refusal to accept his teachings. As the man that personally trained your father and guided him to becoming the Yondaime Hokage, you should feel honored that I would offer to train you. Not to mention, due to your father being my student, I can help you with his signature techniques. Like his legendary Hiroshin no Jutsu and the Rasengan. Yeah, I know, and I am still not interested. The Uzumaki cut off the Sannin once more, earning a growl of annoyance from the toad sage. I will learn my father's techniques at my own pace, not because some desperate, perverted frog wants me to. By the sage, they're toads, not frogs, damn it. Jiraiya lashed out, once again feeling insulted his summons were called frogs. You didn't deny that you them. Naruto pointed out, earning another growl of annoyance from the white-haired man. Why are you being so damn difficult, Gaki? The toad Sannin asked with barely restrained irritation. Not to mention, annoyance. Sure, maybe you can handle learning the Rasengan on your own, but you're going to need someone like me that understands the delicate art of fuinjutsu before you can even hope to unravel what makes the Hiroshin tick. Still not interested, the blonde teen stated, not caring for the mon's bragging. Besides, I already have someone that understands fuinjutsu on a far more intimate level, not to mention, they have seen the technique firsthand. Hearing this, Jiraiya narrowed his eyes in suspicion. There were very few that had seen Minato's signature jutsu firsthand, and only 2 resided within Hino Kuni. Kakashi and himself. It was clear that Minato's last surviving student had no interest in instructing the blonde in his father's technique, and the damn brat was rejecting his own mentorship. As such, the only logical deduction that the spy master could conclude was that someone from outside the village was tutoring and influencing the boy. Which made him a flight risk in the eyes of the toad sage. Come on, Tsubaki-san, let's go home. I am done training for the day. Naruto stated as he turned and began to walk away and started to help the raven-haired woman pack up their lunch. Especially since my current training ground is compromised. Jiraiya couldn't help but feel insulted by the whiskered teen's implication, as if he would spy on a mere genin for their techniques. Though he supposed that due to the teen's status, it was only natural for him to feel a little apprehensive about any stranger. Just as he was about to reassure the Jinchuriki that he wasn't there to spy on him, something on the woman caught his attention. A unique seal he recognized on the back of her neck, prompting his eyes to widen in shock before a perverted grin spread across his face. That woman, he began. She's a slave, isn't she? While neither of the duo said anything in response, it wasn't missed how the woman stiffened at his statement, but otherwise carried on with her task. I'll buy her from you. Again, he was ignored. 250,000 ryo, Jiraiya offered with a grin as he saw both individuals stop moving, the raven-haired woman going rigid in evident fear. How does that sound? Slowly, the whiskered blonde turned towards the man, his eyes shadowed by his hair as his left eye threatened to roar to life in fury while a potent amount of killer intent began to leak out from his body, prompting the white-haired man to take an involuntary step back. How does that sound? Naruto repeated in a cold tone. It sounds like you're nothing but a despicable, decrepit pervert that is so desperate that you need to buy women for them to even be close to you. Jiraiya snarled silently at the insult, feeling his pride being attacked in such a fashion. Listen, Jiraiya the frog, and listen well. The Jinchuriki continued. Tsubaki Koto is not a slave. I don't give a shit what the seal on the back of her neck means. She is a member of the Uzumaki clan. So you can take your offer, shine it up real nice and shiny, stick it sideways, and shove it straight up your. To punctuate his statement, Naruto unleashed a potent wave of killing intent while his left eye roared to life, exposing the kitsune-like eye. Much to the Sanin's horror, he was forced to his knees by the sheer potency of the teen's killer intent. Meanwhile, behind the whiskered teen, Tsubaki could only look on in awe as her master defended her status, even after what she had done to him a week prior. In the entire time she had been with Mizuki, the man had never defended her in any sense, always leaving her to fight her own battles instead of relying on him, as he had once said when she had confronted him about his lack of chivalry. Yet, here was this teenager that she had wronged, not only outright refusing the perverted Mont's offer to buy her, but state that she was a member of his clan, his family. Witnessing this, a light blush dusted her cheeks as she stared at the back of the blonde. Holy shit, I think I just came. A voice sounded from above the trio, prompting the raven-haired woman to look up to see Anko standing on a branch above them. So much killer intent, so much bloodlust, I think I am going to need to change my panties. Don't lie, Anko-chan, you don't wear panties. Came another voice from behind him that the Toad Sage knew all too well, and absolutely despised, almost as much as that Uzumaki bitch. Slowly turning his head to see behind him, his fears were confirmed. Yuri Han. He ground out through clenched teeth. A movement from above diverted his attention back to the snake mistress as she leapt from the branch she was on and landed behind the blonde Jinchuriki, wrapping her arms around his neck from behind and planting a kiss on his cheek, which seemed to calm the teen down a little. Though it also confirmed another suspicion the Sanin had, causing him to mentally scowl at the fact that the brat and his former teammate's disgraced apprentice had seemingly hooked up, effectively closing the market on the last Ice Queen of Konoha. Damn it, he mentally seethed as he saw the two of them together. Looks like both Iruka and I are out of the running to land the finest piece of Konoha had on the market. Regardless of the rumors that surrounded the eccentric snake mistress, the spy master knew better than anyone else that despite the way she acted all promiscuous around her friends and comrades, the woman was anything but easy, not to mention, she was loyal. Well, Yuri spoke in a taunting tone. If it isn't the Toad. There fro. Damn it. You know, Anko began. It's rather concerning that he is more worried about correcting the species than denying that he fooks them. This earned a round of giggles and chuckles at the Toad Sage's expense. Wrapping his arm around Anko's midsection, Naruto's left eye returned to its normal blue color as he motioned for Tsubaki to approach him, wrapping his other hand around her shoulders in a comforting manner. What are you doing here, Yuri? Jiraiya turned his attention back to the woman that stood behind him. You know. The woman ignored his question. I am in a good mood today, so I am going to give you a word of advice. As she spoke, her right eye began to come to life, prompting Jiraiya to make a mental note of the similarity of Naruto's left eye doing the same thing just moments earlier, giving him a rather uneasy feeling at the implications. I don't care what you do while you're in Konoha. Jack off to the women you can never touch, spend all your ryo at every brothel in the village, or let the toads you love so much you in the, I don't care. Yuri licked her lips as she began to release her own unique energy, far more potent than any killer intent he had ever experienced. But you will stay away from my adorable apprentice and those close to him. The Toad Sage's eyes widened to comical proportions as he heard this. His eyes darting between the whiskered teen and the deranged woman. Recognizing that he was in a no-win situation, Jiraiya grit his teeth and turned his full attention to the Widowmaker. This isn't over, Yuri, he began. I am going to. You're going to do what? The deranged woman challenged with a gleeful cackle, daring him to continue his sentence. Her right eye flaring to life even brighter than previously, giving her a more diabolic appearance. There isn't shit you can do, decrepit toad. So run away. Jiraiya of the Sannin, run away once again, just like you did the night Minato sacrificed himself to defend his home, just like you did in Omegakure against Hanzo the Salamander, and just like you did all throughout the Third Shinobi War. Clenching his teeth in anger, the Toad Sage took the only logical course and leapt off, vacating the area as the sound of Yuri's maddening laughter echoed off the trees, as if to mock him of his past failures. So, Naruto-koi, Yuri turned her attention to her betrothed. Have you completed the task I gave you this morning? With a grin, the whiskered teen stepped away from both Anko and Tsubaki and cycled through a familiar set of hand seals before slamming his palm on the ground as plumes of thick white smoke enveloped the area around them. Somewhere underneath Konoha, the clacking sound of a hardwood cane echoed off the stone flooring and reverberated along the dimly lit hallway as a frail-looking elderly individual made his way towards a large set of double doors. With shaggy black hair, and his right eye covered with a bandage, an old injury from the war, alongside an X-shaped scar on his chin. Despite his position in the village, his attire was rather simple. A plain white shirt was worn under his dark-colored robe that concealed his right arm, which was also bandaged. Reaching the massive double doors, the elderly man effortlessly pushed them open and entered what appeared to be a modestly sized laboratory of some kind with nearly half a dozen scientists moving about the room, working with various complex instruments. In the very center of the room stood a large glass-like cylinder, filled with some sort of liquid. Within the cylinder containment was a woman with long red hair, floating weightlessly in the strange flood. Various tubes and wires connected to her body, and a respirator covering her nose and mouth. The elder man stopped just before the containment cell, looking at the woman with an emotionless eye. Danzo-sama. One of the scientists acknowledged the Mont's arrival. Report. The now identified Danzo commanded. Has there been any progress? I am afraid not, Danzo-sama. The scientist reported. The seals on this woman is beyond anything we have ever encountered. They're not just imprinted on her body, but within her very cells, making it impossible to extract any viable material from her. Danzo narrowed his lone eye at the Mont's explanation, minor annoyance etched upon his face. The thrice-damned Uzumaki woman had always been a constant thorn in his side when she was active, ensuring he was unable to manipulate Minato to follow a path for the greater good of Konoha. Even the night the Kyuubi had been extracted from her, she still had the strength to massacre a majority of his root forces that he had sent to capture her. It had taken roughly 3.5 squads of his own Anbu to finally subdue the woman, and out of 42 men, only 3 survived in the end. We've tried everything, Danzo-sama. The scientist continued. Even extracting her eggs directly ended in failure as the material immediately rotted as soon as we had removed it from the body. Keep working to find a solution. The elder war hawk commanded as he turned to leave the room. Currently, Kushina Uzumaki is our only chance of unlocking all of the Uzumaki secrets. What of her son? The other man questioned, prompting the elder man to stop mid-step. The Jinchuriki is currently out of reach, since Yuri Han has returned to the village and had taken an interest in the weapon. To provoke her would be foolish on our part, Danzo stated with a small frown. However, this may work in our favor. Hitaki Kakashi has been squandering the Jinchuriki's potential in favor of the Uchiha heir, making our weapon defective. Yuri's arrival has corrected this error. Having said his piece, Danzo left the scientists to perform their tasks. Unaware of a pair of violet eyes staring down at the aging war hawk before slowly closing once more, leaving those in the room unaware that the woman was regaining consciousness. Soon, Kushina, the evil, Uzumaki would rise once more, and carve a bloody path with the bodies of those that had wronged her and her family. Starting with one Danzo Shimura. A deep frown marred Hiruzen's aged face as he read over the files that he had just received from Maya at Yuri Han's behest, whom was accompanied surprisingly by Ino Yamanaka. Inoichi had been rather sparse on the details, but evidently just over 2 weeks ago the young mind-walker had laid into both of her parents in a drunken rant. Since then, the young Kunoichi could commonly be found in the company of Maya and sometimes, even Yuri Han herself, making the elder man feel a great swell of pity for Inoichi and his wife, especially if any of the woman's quirks rubbed off on their daughter. The file the two young women had dropped off was a rather detailed report of the movements of one Orochimaru, more specifically, the snake's dealings with Rasa, the cage, as well as a detailed layout of the newly formed Otogakure that sprung up in Oto no Kuni, Land of Sound, formerly known as Ta no Kuni, Land of Rice. A relatively new country in the political scene that his disgraced student had become Otokage of. Accompanying the report was high-definition photos of the two meeting not once, but multiple times up until just under a month ago, when the meetings suddenly stopped. Suspiciously, this was also after the cage had started wearing a veil over his face, citing an assassination attempt had left his face horribly disfigured. However, the analysts at SIN had determined that somewhere in between the final meetings, Orochimaru had captured or more than likely, killed the cage and had been impersonating Rasa for the last month. In between the sudden rise of Otogakure, whom also had a genin participating in the finals, and the change in the cage's mannerisms, it was evident to Hiruzen that his former pupil was pulling strings from behind the scenes like a puppet master, and mobilizing the combined forces of Otogakure and Sunagakure for one purpose, and one purpose only: war. I doubt the Sunagakure knows they are being manipulated by Orochimaru. Hiruzen mused with a frown as he placed the paper back into the folder it arrived in and laid it back down on his desk, releasing a tired sigh. Pondering how to utilize this information without tipping off his former student. Though, he didn't have long to ponder in peace when the form of Jiraiya appeared in his window, looking visibly upset about something. "Why is Yuri Han training my godson?" the Toad Sage inquired heatedly, earning a frown from his sensei. "Well," Hiruzen exhaled in disappointment. "Hello to you too, Jiraiya." "Don't give me that crap," Jiraiya retorted. "What the hell were you thinking, allowing that psycho bitch near my godson? And allowing him to have a slave? Have you lost your damn mind? The Gaki isn't ready to have a responsibility like that." Hiruzen narrowed his eyes at his student's blatant lack of respect for him and his position, but had decided to let it slide for the time being. Naruto-kun needed a sensei to prepare for the finals, and Miss Yuri was more than eager to lend a hand in ensuring he was ready. He replied with a wry grin as he took out his wooden pipe from his desk drawer and packed it with tobacco before lighting it and took a few puffs from it, exhaling slowly through his nostrils. "As for the slave, you must be referring to Miss Tsubaki. That is Naruto-kun's business. Still, you should have consulted me first," Jiraiya insisted, crossing his arms over his chest. "As the Gaki's godfather, I have the right to know." Hiruzen was silent for a handful of seconds as he puffed on his tobacco pipe before turning his attention back to his old student. "You say that Minato made you Naruto-kun's godfather," he began. "I trust that you have written documentation as proof of guardianship, correct?" "Well, no," the Toad Sage coughed into his hand, as if trying to cover his answer. "It was a verbal agreement. Minato never had time to draw up the paperwork and then, well, that night happened." The elder village leader inwardly frowned at this. Minato was not the type of person to leave loose ends unresolved. Especially something as important as securing his own son's welfare in the event anything happened to him and his mother. "Jiraiya, verbal agreements will not hold up in front of the courts should someone challenge your claim of guardianship," Hiruzen reminded the white-haired man. Come on sensei. My word should be good enough, right? Jiraiya commented jovially, playing it off as if it was nothing serious. Besides, it's not like anyone can challenge me on it. Actually, that is where you are mistaken. What do you mean? It just so happens that Yuri Han has written documentation signed by Kushina-chan, and sealed with the Uzumaki clan sigil, officially placing Naruto-kun under her care. While his face didn't show it, having years of experience in masking his true emotions, Jiraiya was seething internally. He had spent years and a considerable amount of effort trying to keep the damn brat isolated and stunted as much as possible, hoping to make him so attention-starved that the kid would eat up any kind of acknowledgement. Positive or negative, so long as someone acknowledged him. However, even in death that damned Uzumaki bitch had interfered with his plans once again. Sure, he had attempted to get Minato to draw up the proper paperwork and name him the boy's godfather shortly after he had learned of the prophecy, but the young Hokage had refused, stating that Kushina had already selected who their son's guardian would be, should the worst come to pass, and despite the man being a feared war hero from the Third Shinobi War, he was not brave enough to argue with his wife on the matter and had simply left it be. And the slave, I didn't think you would be so cold as to force another into servitude. Jiraiya inquired, diverting the topic of the boy's guardianship. He would have to come up with something to make Yuri's claim over the boy invalid. Still, perhaps he could get his sensei to release the woman from the brat's ownership and perhaps even transfer it to him. As I stated, that is Naruto-kun's business. Hiruzen repeated. Just know that it was the best course of action for all involved in that particular incident. Jiraiya frowned at this, as it sounded like something big had gone down between the brat and the woman whom now served him. Part of him wondered if it had anything to do with the falsified information he had fed the woman. He had speculated that the information he had passed off to her through a proxy would have triggered a violent response, but had deemed it an acceptable risk to stall the brat until he arrived. Now, since you are here, Jiraiya, the elder man broke the toad sage from his musing. Do you have anything of note to report? Nah, everything has been quiet as of late. Jiraiya replied with a shrug. Truth was, he hadn't checked in with his network in over a month, focusing instead on his plans for the Gaki. Sure, he could report what he knew of the Akatsuki, but they were not an immediate threat as of yet, so he still had time. Hiruzen's eyes brushed over the folder that Maya dropped off not too long ago, and allowed a frown to fall upon his face. He had intended to have Jiraiya investigate whomever had given the falsified files to Tsubaki, however with the supposed spy master disregarding a new shinobi village springing up practically overnight, he had decided against that idea. Not to mention the plot surrounding his wayward student Orochimaru and the Mont's dealings with Tsunagaku. In short, Jiraiya's famed network was proving to be unreliable at best or incompetent at worst. If you have nothing, then you are dismissed, Hiruzen stated, a tone of authority in his voice. And I would strongly advise staying away from Naruto-kun and those close to him. I will not be held accountable if you provoke Yuri Han. With a scowl on his face, Jiraiya departed the office through the window he had entered from. Knowing full well that his old sensei would refuse to offer any aid in separating the brat from the damn bitch. No, if he wanted to salvage his plans for the prophecy, he was going to have to go behind the old man's back and seek aid from the Fire Daimyo's court itself. Though first, he had to find a way to nullify Yuri's claim over the brat. I will have to request Danzo's aid in this. If anyone can find any dirt on that damn woman, he would. He plotted. Though he won't do it for free. I can't give him the Gaki, but perhaps offer the old war hawk his pick of the brat's kids when he has any. After all, children go missing all the time. Elsewhere in Konoha, Sakura. It had been 2 weeks since Sakura Haruno had seen her rival and frenemy, and the Pinkett was starting to get worried for all the wrong reasons. While the logical side of her mind was worried about her rival's well-being, those concerns however were drowned out by her fangirl mentality. Envisioning various scenarios, both innocent and lewd in nature, of the young Ino Yamanaka seducing her Sasuke-kun away from her. Which is what led the pink-haired Kunoichi to her current destination. The Yamanaka flower shop. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. Upon entering the flower shop, her nostrils were assaulted with various aromas from the fauna that filled the room. Orchid, roses, lilies, azalea, marigold, and even the rare fire lily native to only the most remote locations within Hi-no-Kuni could all be found in this one room. Their sweet scents mixing with the wet soil used to nurture the various flora. If Sakura were to be honest with herself, she would admit that she missed hanging out with her former friend here. Ah, Sakura-san. A deep voice drew her attention to the counter, where a tall blonde male stood. Haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, it's been a while, Inoichi-san. Sakura timidly replied. She had always felt a little intimidated by the man, especially considering his position within the torture and interrogation division in the village. Second in command, just under Ibiki Morino. While Anko Mitarashi, the crazy proctor from the second phase of the exams, used physical means to extract information, Inoichi took the psychological approach. What can I do for you? Inoichi inquired with a smile. I was wondering if you can tell me where Ino is. The pinkett asked. I haven't seen her since the preliminary rounds, and I am getting kind of worried. Almost immediately the man's mood seemed to plummet at the mention of his daughter's name. With a heavy sigh, his shoulders slouched a little. I'm afraid the last time I have seen her was nearly 2 weeks ago when she laid into her mother and I something fierce. The man stated with another heavy sigh. Though I suppose we deserved it. Anyways, she has been staying at the SIN building last I knew. SIN. Sakura parroted. The acronym sounded familiar, but she couldn't exactly place it. Shinobi Information Network, Inoichi explained. They're a sort of freelance information broker company, privately owned. Originally founded in Konoha about 20 years ago or so, but moved their headquarters overseas to the outerlands. Anyways, he continued, you'll find their building in the financial district not far from the Hokage's tower. Very modern looking, you can't miss it. And if you see my daughter, tell her I am sorry, okay? Okay. The young Kunoichi replied with a frown. Any thoughts of Ino seducing Sasuke banished from her mind since it was clear that whatever happened between Ino and her parents sounded very serious. Enough for her to move out. Unsure of what else to say, Sakura bid Inoichi farewell and quickly departed the shop and proceeded to her next destination that was located on the other side of the village. The building in question was not too difficult to find, being the only modern-looking building in the entire village. Standing a modest 3 stories tall, covered in dark gray marble tiles and reflective glass windows making it nearly impossible for anyone to peer inside, with a very simple Shinobi Information Network displayed on the side of the building in white. Finding the entrance to the building, she gave the door a firm tug to open, but found it would not budge. Stepping back, she frowned before her eyes fell onto a small black box on the wall next to the entrance with a simple white button on it. Hesitantly, she pressed the button and waited. Yes, came the short response from the box. Hi. Sakura fumbled over her words, feeling a bit intimidated in speaking into the box. While the voice on the other end wasn't hostile, it wasn't exactly friendly either. Rather, it was blunt and straight to the point. I am looking for Ino Yamanaka. I was told I could find her here. After nearly a minute of tense silence, a loud buzzing noise sounded from the door, quickly followed by an audible click, signifying the door had been unlocked, allowing the pinkett entrance to the building. Once inside, Sakura found herself in the reception area decorated with comfortable-looking couches and chairs, large potted plants of various green plants that lined the windows, and monitors displaying various things from regional shows to reports of what was going on not only in the elemental nations, but also the outerlands as well. "Please take a seat," the receptionist instructed, alerting the pinkett to the young blonde woman that looked around the age of 25 sitting behind the desk in the center of the room. "Ino-san will be out shortly." The woman in question was a tall and slim with curves that made the young Kunoichi envious of. Her blue eyes shielded behind a pair of black-rimmed glasses. Strawberry blonde hair flowed around her face and down her back, roughly shoulder length. Small studded earrings adorned the woman's ears, which was accompanied by a long-sleeved black dress that showed off her cleavage, which was barely restrained by the fishnet undershirt she wore under her blouse. Silently, Sakura complied and sat down in one of the empty chairs. Her eyes wandering over the television screens as numbers scrolled across them, indicating the stocks of various companies both local and foreign as they rose and fell in the financial storm that was the stock market. Minutes ticked by before the sound of chattering echoed from down the hall as two figures entered the room. The first individual Sakura took notice of was a woman with long crimson hair that was tied into a long braided ponytail that ran down her back, stopping just above her ankles. The woman's outfit consisted of a simple-looking business suit with a long-sleeved jacket that was unbuttoned, revealing the white dress shirt underneath that had the top half unbuttoned as well, showing off her bountiful cleavage that had a purple tie running down in between the woman's large bust. The shirt showing off the woman's midriff as well. A pair of armor-knuckled gloves adorned her hands, showing that this woman was prepared for combat at a moment's notice. Black slacks, held up by a dark gray belt with a gold oblong buckle and a pair of combat-style stilettos to tie off the woman's attire. Walking beside and chatting with the woman was Sakura's longtime rival for the lone Uchiha, Ino Yamanaka, though the pinkett could scarcely recognize the young mind-walker. Gone was the blonde's old attire, replaced by a more modern look. A two-piece outfit that was mostly solid purple with the exception of her inner thighs being white, and patches on her outer thighs and chest with a purple and white camo design. Her pants hugging her hips tightly, with a pair of soft-soled boots to protect her feet. Which Sakura found odd, as Kunoichi and Shinobi used open-toed sandals to allow for better chakra control. Something else that the pinkett noticed about her rival's new attire was the lack of kunai or shuriken holster, instead replaced with two tonfa that hung loosely along her thighs. The top of Ino's new outfit consisted of an open-shoulder, long-sleeved vest which covered most of the mind-walker's arms with a pair of combat gloves adorning her hands, giving the young mind-walker the appearance of an assassin or spy from the movies the pinkett had seen in years ago. For clarification, Ino is wearing Nina's outfit from Tekken 5. Ino pig, Sakura stammered, catching the two women's attention. The crimson-haired woman stopped and eyed the pink-haired Kunoichi, almost as if scrutinizing the teenage girl before her with contempt. A scowl forming across her face as if she had smelled something disgusting before turning her attention back towards Ino. "I have errands to run, Ino," the woman stated simply, completely disregarding Sakura's presence. "Take the rest of the day off to rest, and I shall see you tomorrow at the usual time." "All right, Maya. See ya tomorrow morning," Ino replied as the now identified Maya turned on her heel and walked back down the hallway her and Ino had just come from. Once the crimson-haired woman had left, the young blonde turned her attention to her former rival. "Been a while, Sakura. What brings you here?" "Okay. What the hell happened?" Sakura finally inquired, breaking from her confusion. "You just disappeared after the preliminaries, then you move out of your parents' house all of a sudden, and now you're here in this place. I take it that since you are here, you've already been by my parents' shop." Ino commented with a small sigh. Yeah," Sakura frowned. "Your father said something about you laying into both of them before you disappeared." "Yeah," Ino nervously chuckled, rubbing the back of her head. "I kind of stayed out late that night drinking with an." "What?" The Pinkett interrupted. But, we're too young to drink and... The young blonde woman shot her former rival an unamused and mildly annoyed look. Yes, Sakura, I was drinking. As Kunoichi, we can do that. Ino deadpanned with a heavy sigh, wondering if the Pinkett even paid attention at all when Iruka-sensei had given them the lecture about the privileges that came with earning your Hite 8. Anyways, full-on liquid courage, I went off on both of my parents. My father for being overprotective and not allowing me to show my true potential, and my mother for trying to turn me into a gold-digging whore. What? Sakura stammered, confused by what she was hearing. What's going on, Ino? Ino frowned before letting out a soft sigh. She supposed that she had to talk to someone about this, if only to get it off her own chest and give her some sense of clarity as to how to approach her parents, namely her father. While she did view Maya as a friend and in some ways, a sister-like figure, the young mind-walker didn't want to burden the crimson-haired woman with her family problems. Sakura, however, was well acquainted with her parents and at one point in their friendship early on, was considered to be a second daughter to them. Look, I am hungry. Ino began, turning her full attention to the Pinkett. How about we talk about this over lunch? All right, Sakura agreed, her curiosity eating at her to find out what had transpired between her rival and her parents. I'm heading out to lunch, Khalifa-san. Ino informed the blonde secretary sitting behind the front desk. Want me to bring you back something? The woman seemed to think over her options, before a sultry grin spread across her face. How about a sample of that blonde stud? Afraid you'll have to get in line for that appetizer. The young mind-walker laughed. I haven't even gotten a taste of him yet. Sakura could only blink in confusion as she looked between the two blondes. Suppose I will have to settle for my usual then. Khalifa sighed. Spicy roast lamb, a loaded baked potato and a salad on the side then. Ino confirmed, earning a nod from the spectacled blonde woman. All right, be back as soon as I can. With that, Ino led Sakura to the exit and out of the building to head to her favorite establishment to eat at, Yakiniku-Q. Konoha Market District, Tsubaki Koto. Tsubaki hummed happily to herself as she made her way through the shopping district of the village. A medium-sized bag filled with various vegetables, and other ingredients she planned on using for this evening's dinner for her young master. Shortly after their unfortunate encounter with Jiraiya, Yuri had called an end for Naruto's training for the day after he had successfully summoned his personal summon for the eccentric woman. Unfortunately for Tsubaki, her young master's personal summon was a giant spider. Something that had sent chills down her spine. Still, the former Jonin had wanted to spoil the whiskered teenager this evening as a reward for not only defending her honor before the perverted Sanin, but also outright rejecting the Mont's offer to buy her without hesitation. Something she was extremely grateful for, as she could only imagine the humiliation the Toad Sage would have in store for her. Since the elder man lacked the same empathy and humility the young Uzumaki had. Whereas Naruto went out of his way to avoid any phrases that sounded like commands towards her, Jiraiya would no doubt abuse the fact she would not be able to refuse an order given. Let's see. Tsubaki began to double-check her purchases for tonight's dinner. Flour, eggs, baking powder, and chicken broth. Just need to get the pork cuts and that should be everything I need to make ramen from scratch. Stop dragging your feet and keep moving. A harsh whisper broke the former Jonin's attention, turning her attention towards two figures moving through the marketplace. One male with bandages covering most of his face, leaving only his left eye and eyebrow exposed, roughly pushing what appeared to be his teammate, a young woman with fair skin and long black hair that almost ran down to her calves, tied by a violet ribbon near the end. Tsubaki narrowed her eyes and she observed too. The body language of the young Kunoichi clearly showed that she was uncomfortable and was not being led willingly to whatever the duo's destination was. Silently, She watched as the male genin shoved the kunoichi off of the main street and into a small alleyway. Taking that as her cue, Tsubaki secured her shopping bag and leapt into action, taking to the rooftops to follow the duo and learn more about what was going on. Just so you know, Kin, it's nothing personal, the rapt genin stated, though his tone was less than sincere. Bullshit, Dosu, the identified Kin retorted with a scoff. I bet you're hoping that if you're an obedient bitch, the damn pedophile will let you suck him off while his four-eyed buddy you in the... The bandaged genin took offense to the young woman's words and roughly grabbed her, spinning her around and slamming her against the wall, earning a pained grunt from the kunoichi. His lone visible eye narrowing dangerously as he brought up his Kayome Supika dangerously close to her face in a threatening fashion. Don't ever disrespect Orochimaru-sama in front of me again. Dosu hissed. If not for him your life, and it's your life he. However, before he could utter another word his body suddenly became limp, causing him to fall forward. Landing face first into the wall right next to Kin, knocked unconscious. Surprised by this sudden turn of events, the Oto kunoichi turned her attention to her unlikely savior, a dark-haired woman of average height with black hair braided into a ponytail that ran down her back, while a pair of dark bangs that framed her face. Not to sound ungrateful, but who the hell are you, and what do you want with me? Kin inquired, her body assuming a defensive stance as she eyed the woman skeptically. I observed your trek through the marketplace. Tsubaki stated. Your body language indicated you were not comfortable with your traveling companion here. Not to mention, he was hardly quiet in regards to your involvement with Orochimaru. Upon hearing the snake Sanin's name, the young kunoichi's eyes widened in fear, having assumed the worst possibilities that now lay in store for her, due to her association with Konoha's biggest traitor. It was obvious that even with her weapons, she would not stand a chance against this woman. Judging by her posture and how easily she dispatched Dosu, Kin could tell that she was not a civilian by any means. Perhaps an off-duty kunoichi, Jonin level at least, if not Anbu. So, Kin swallowed thickly. What now? Now, we go see Hokage-sama. Tsubaki commented as she held out her hand to the young Oto kunoichi. You want a way out from being under the snake? I may have a solution that will keep you safe from both Orochimaru as well as keep you out of prison. In a span of a few seconds, Kin weighed her options. Either go with this woman whom had just saved her from being used as a sacrifice for that snake bastard and accept what she had to offer, or attempt to strike out on her own with no one to look out for her. With a reluctant sigh, she accepted the older woman's hand, and in a flurry of swirling leaves, both were gone from the alleyway. Yakiniku Q, Sakura and Ino. Sakura could only stare at the blonde young woman seated across from her, completely gobsmacked at not only at what she had been told from her companion, but what she was currently witnessing. The young Yamanaka heiress had already put away 2 hefty plates of food from the buffet, and was currently working to clear her third. So let me get this straight. Sakura broke the silence as she rubbed her temples as she tried to wrap her mind around what she had learned so far. You're saying that the entire time we were in the academy together and up until just 2 weeks ago you've been hiding what you're actually capable of because your father is overprotective of you. And you never liked Sasuke-kun and only pretended to in order to blend in with the crowd, as you say, because your mother suggested it. But she only suggested it to get access to the Uchiha clan's wealth. Not only that, but you were attracted to someone else. Did I miss anything? Nah, that's about the gist of it. Ino commented as she dropped another rib bone on her plate, completely devoid of any meat, effectively clearing her third and final plate of food. Using a napkin to wipe any remains of her meal from around her mouth as she leaned back in her chair, releasing a content sigh. So, how did you end up in that sin place? The Pinkett inquired, genuinely curious as to how that came about. ran into the big boss of the place that night 2 weeks ago and after hanging out for the entire evening, got offered a part-time job. The blonde shrugged as she flagged the waitress down to pay for her meal, as well as placing an order for Khalifa's lunch to go. It had been more or less the truth of how that had happened, though not in the exact stated time frame. In fact, it wasn't until the next morning that the young mind-walker had encountered Yuri once more in another chance meeting as the Yamanaka was departing the hotel she had stayed at the previous night. Being blunt and to the point, the Widowmaker had inquired as to why Ino hadn't returned to her home. After a quick explanation, she was led to the SIN building and informed she would be staying here and had placed her under Maya's care, much to the red-headed woman's ire at the time. When asked why, Yuri merely shrugged and commented, "Because I enjoy your company, princess." And Ino didn't argue. Sakura broke her trip down memory lane. So who's the mystery guy you have a crush on? The Pinkett questioned with a grin, curious if it could be someone she knew. Not that she would give up on her Sasuke-kun, but she was still curious as to how this mystery guy would measure up to the Uchiha. Why so curious? Ino smirked as the waitress delivered a small bag with the to-go order, along with the change from the paid bill. Giving the waitress a generous tip, the blonde turned her attention back to her former rival. Going to give up on the Uchiha and explore other options? Not a chance, Sakura exclaimed. Now that you're out of the picture, Sasuke-kun is all but guaranteed to fall in love with me and I will help him restore his clan. Yeah well, the blonde mind-walker began as she got up and secured the bag. Good luck with the Uchiha, though between you and me, I am pretty sure he plays for the other team. Leaving the Pinkett to muse over her parting words, Ino disappeared out of the restaurant and down the street. It had taken nearly a full minute before the insinuation of the mind-walker's words register in the Pinkett's mind, though once they did, she turned to retort, only to find herself alone. Damn, she didn't even tell me who the mystery guy is. Unknown location, underneath Konoha. You're asking a lot, Jiraiya. The bandaged elder stated from his seated position behind a desk that looked very similar to the Hokage's. In fact, the entire room was a mock replica of the Hokage's office. Yuri Han is not a woman to be tested, nor provoked. I am aware of the woman's reputation. The Toad Sanin replied with a scoff. But I need to get that damned bitch away from the brat so I can seal away his memories and wipe the slate clean, so to speak, so I can train him properly. Make sure he is strong enough to fulfill the prophecy, but not too strong that he can't be controlled. While his face remained stoic, Danzo inwardly frowned at the selfish motives of the man before him. It was clear that Jiraiya had no interest in the preservation of Konoha, or even the elemental nations for that matter, and that his sole reason of wanting to isolate the Jinchuriki was for his own personal benefit. Personally, the Elder War Hawk had no issue with the woman training the boy. A weapon was of no use if it was blunted and dulled to the point of unreliability in the field. And what do you intend to offer in trade for this service? The War Hawk inquired. Figured as soon as the Gaki had a kid, I could ensure something happened to make that kid disappear. The insinuation was left hanging in the air for a handful of seconds before he continued. However, until that happens, I could throw my voice behind your bid for the hat, since the old man is getting senile in his later years. Allowing the brat to do as he pleases, not to mention owning a slave. At this, Danzo allowed himself to quirk an eyebrow at the Sanin's words, ignoring the latter part, already well aware of Tsubaki's current servitude to the Uzumaki for her attack on him weeks prior. However, the former part had caught his attention. Having the support of Konoha's only remaining loyal Sanin in his move for the Hokage position would carry a lot of weight behind it and practically ensure his victory. It was certainly a tempting offer. It will take time to fabricate convincing evidence to bring before the Fire Daimyo.